You are standing on black volcanic gravel that stretches all the way to the horizon. Nothing grows, no trees, no grass, just dead ground, the color of ash and old fire. And then, one summer it turns purple, mile after mile of it, a sea of violet flowers where nothing had lived for 1,000 years. That is happening in Iceland right now. It is not a miracle. It is not paint. It is not something a scientist cooked up in a laboratory. It is one humble plant doing a job we used to know how to do ourselves, pulling fertilizer straight out of thin air and pushing it back down into dead soil for free. That is the whole secret of this video. There is a way to feed your soil, your garden, and your plants without buying a single bag of anything from a store, and it sat on every kitchen table in this country 100 years ago. I am going to show you exactly how it works and how you can put it to use in your own yard this weekend. And near the end, I will share something I found buried in the records of the oldest soil agency on Earth, founded in 1907, that almost no one talks about anymore. I first saw those purple fields in a photograph a neighbor carried home from a trip abroad, and I swear I sat at my own kitchen table and thought about my grandfather for a solid hour, because he did the very same thing that Plant does with nothing but a paper sack of dried peas, and he never paid a cent for it. This works whether you have 40 acres or one tired little flower bed beside your front step. So stay with me. Here is the part almost nobody knows. Iceland was not always a desert. When the first settlers stepped off their boats around the year 874, that island was green. Historians who study the old pollen buried in the soil believe that somewhere between 1/4 and 2/5 of the whole country was covered in birch woodland and thick grass. It looked nothing like the black moonscape you picture today. Then the settlers did what people did back then. They cut the trees for timber and firewood. They let sheep graze the young shoots down to nothing. And the thin volcanic soil, once the roots that held it were gone, simply blew away and washed away. Within a few centuries, one of the greenest islands in the North Atlantic had become one of the largest man-made deserts in Europe. The soil did not just get poorer, it physically left. The wind carried it out to sea. By the early 1900s, the situation was so desperate that the Icelandic people did something no other nation had done. In 1907, they founded a government service devoted entirely to saving their soil. It is the oldest organization of its kind anywhere on the planet. Think about that. A whole country so afraid of losing the ground under its feet that it built an agency to hold the land in place. But holding sand in place is one thing. Bringing dead ground back to life is another thing entirely. And for decades they struggled. You cannot just scatter grass seed on black gravel and walk away. There was no nitrogen in that ground. No nutrients, nothing for a plant to eat. Therefore they needed a plant that could feed itself. A plant that would not wait for the soil to be rich. A plant that would make its own dinner out of the air and, in doing so, leave the ground behind it richer than it found it. In 1945, a forester named Hakon Bjarnason brought seeds of the Nootka lupine over from Alaska. That is the tall purple flower you see in the photographs. He chose it for one reason and one reason only. The lupine does something that seems almost impossible. It takes a barren, lifeless patch of gravel and within a few short years turns it into living soil that other plants can grow in. And once it took hold, it spread slowly at first, then across whole valleys. Every summer now, those dead volcanic plains bloom purple, and behind the flowers, quietly, the soil comes back to life. So the mystery is not really the color. The mystery is how a single plant manages to do the one thing every gardener, every farmer, and every grandmother with a vegetable patch has always needed. How does a plant reach into empty air and pull out food for the ground? The answer is the forgotten method. And once you understand it, you will never look at a bag of fertilizer the same way again. Here is what is actually going on under those purple flowers. The air you are breathing right now is about 78% nitrogen. Nitrogen is the single most important thing a plant needs to grow green and strong. It is the exact thing they sell you in every bag of lawn, food, and garden fertilizer on the shelf. So here is the cruel joke. Your garden is drowning in nitrogen. It surrounds every plant, every leaf, every blade of grass. There are literally tons of it floating over every acre of your yard. but plants cannot use it. Not directly. The nitrogen in the air is locked up tight, two atoms clamped together so hard that an ordinary plant can no more eat it than you could eat a rock. For most of history, no one understood this. Then in 1886, two German researchers named Hermann Hellriegel and Hermann Wilfarth figured out something extraordinary. They discovered that one special family of plants had a secret partner. That family is the legumes, peas, beans, clover, lentils, alfalfa, peanuts, and yes, lupines. These plants make a deal with a tiny bacteria that lives in the soil. The plant grows little swollen bumps on its roots, like tiny pink beads, and it invites the bacteria to move in. It even feeds them sugar. In exchange, the bacteria do the one thing the plant cannot. They pry those clamped nitrogen atoms apart and hand the nitrogen over in a form the plant can finally eat. That is nitrogen fixation. A living factory, running underground, powered by nothing but sunlight and air, turning free nitrogen from the sky into plant food in the dirt. Those little pink beads on the roots are the whole secret. They are the reason a lupine can grow in black gravel where nothing else survives. It is not taking food from the ground, it is putting food into the ground. Now, let me tell you why you have never heard this explained plainly, even though people knew it for thousands of years. In 1913, two more Germans, Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch, worked out how to do the same trick inside a factory. They built enormous machines that force air and heat and pressure together to make nitrogen fertilizer by the ton. It was one of the biggest inventions of the last century, and it did feed a growing world. But it changed something quiet and important. Before those factories, if you wanted nitrogen in your soil, you grew it. You planted the right plant and it made the fertilizer for you for free, using the same trick the Iceland lupine uses. After those factories, you bought it in a bag every single year, forever. Because this is not some obscure trick a few farmers stumbled onto. This was the backbone of how the human race fed itself for 2,000 years. Go back to ancient Rome. There was a writer named Columella who, around the year 60, wrote a massive farming manual called On Agriculture. In it, he tells farmers plainly that if they want to enrich a tired field, they should plant beans and lupines and then plow them back into the ground. He did not know about bacteria. He could not have. But he knew the result. He watched it happen with his own eyes, and he wrote it down so his neighbors would know. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder said much the same thing. He wrote that the lupine, of all things, was one of the best gifts a farmer could give to worn-out soil. The very same flower now blooming purple across Iceland was praised by a Roman 2,000 years ago as a way to heal exhausted land. That is not a coincidence. That is the same forgotten method whispered down across 20 centuries. Jump forward to the Middle Ages in Europe. Farmers used what they called the three-field system. They would grow grain in one field, plant a nitrogen-fixing crop like beans or clover in another, and let a third rest. Every year they rotated. They had no idea what a nitrogen atom was. But they had learned through hard experience and hungry winters that if you put the legume field into the rotation, everything grew better the next year. Whole villages survived because somebody long ago noticed that beans made the wheat grow taller. And here in America, we had our own hero of this story. A man named George Washington Carver, working in the late 1800s and early 1900s, watched Southern farmers destroy their soil by growing cotton and nothing but cotton year after year until the ground was dead. He told them to plant peanuts. Peanuts are a legume. He was telling them, in plain terms, to let the plant put the nitrogen back that the cotton had stripped out. He was teaching the exact same lesson Columella wrote down 2,000 years earlier. So here is what I want you to feel. This knowledge is not fringe. It is not New Age. It is the single most reliable piece of farming wisdom in all of human history, understood by Romans, by medieval peasants, by American farmers, and by an entire Icelandic nation trying to save its own soil. And most of us, in the space of about 70 years, simply forgot it and started paying for it instead. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now. This is the part I made just for you. And that is the part that ought to make you a little angry. We did not lose this knowledge because it stopped working. It works exactly as well as it ever did. We lost it because somebody figured out how to sell us, in a plastic sack, the very thing our own gardens could make out of thin air. If recovering this kind of buried practical knowledge is something you want to go deeper on, I put together a digital book called First Wins that walks through the first real steps of taking back this kind of self-reliance, one small and doable move at a time. There is also Deep Leverage, which goes further into the systems behind it, and the Full System, which puts the whole picture together. All three are linked in the description below. They are the kind of reading that sits well at a kitchen table, which I suspect is exactly where a lot of you are right now. But before I show you how to bring this back into your own yard, you need to understand just how old and how deep this knowledge really runs. You are thinking that this sounds nice for people with big gardens and strong backs and plenty of time. You are thinking you are too old for this, or too busy, or that you would have to drive to some special store and buy some special seed you have never heard of. You are thinking this is not really for someone like you. I thought the same thing. So let me take all of that off the table right now. You do not need a garden. You do not need special seed. You do not need to spend $1. Go to your own kitchen tonight and open the cabinet. If you have a bag of dried green peas, or dried beans, or lentils, or split peas sitting in there, you are holding live seeds. Those are not just food. Those are legumes. The exact same family as the Iceland lupine. Here is what you do. Take a small handful, maybe 20 or 30 of them, and drop them in a glass of water tonight before you go to bed. Let them soak overnight. In the morning they will be swollen and soft. That is life waking up. If it is the growing season, push them about 1 inch, roughly 1 knuckle deep, into any patch of bare dirt you have. A flower bed, a pot on the porch, the sad bare corner where nothing grows. If it is winter, keep them on a wet paper towel in a dish on the windowsill and watch them sprout in a few days, just to prove to yourself that the pantry is full of living things. Within a week or two, you will have green shoots. And here's the part that will make you smile. Wait a few weeks, then gently dig up one single plant and look at the roots. If you see tiny pink or reddish bumps clinging to them, like little beads, you are looking at the exact same fertilizer factory that is turning Iceland purple in your own dirt, made from your own pantry. For nothing, that is the whole point. This is not a method that belongs to experts. It belonged to ordinary people at kitchen tables, and it still does. It belongs to you the moment you decide to use it. But knowing that legumes make nitrogen is only half of the forgotten method, here is where nearly everyone gets it wrong. And here is the piece I promised you at the start. Because there is a right way and a wrong way to actually capture that free fertilizer, and if you do it the wrong way, you throw the whole gift away without ever knowing it. Let me tell you what I found. When I first learned all this, I did what most people would do. I planted my beans and peas, I let them grow all summer, I let them flower, and then I let them make their pods, and I harvested every last bean to eat. Then I pulled the whole plant up by the roots, shook off the dirt, and tossed it on the trash pile. I thought I had done everything right. I had done it exactly backwards, and it took me digging into old agricultural research and modern university extension studies to understand why. Here is the secret, and it is startlingly simple once you hear it. The plant does not build up that free nitrogen for you. It builds it for itself, and specifically for its babies, meaning its seeds. The amount of nitrogen stored in those little root nodules climbs and climbs all through the spring and early summer, and it reaches its very peak at one exact moment. That moment is when the plant is in full flower, just before it starts making seeds. The instant that plant starts pouring its energy into making beans and pods, it does something you would never expect. It reaches back down into its own roots and its own leaves and pulls the nitrogen out to pack into the seeds. So if you wait until harvest, if you wait for the pods to fill and dry the way I did, the plant has already sucked most of that free fertilizer back up out of the ground and locked it away inside the beans you are about to carry off to your kitchen. You harvest the nitrogen and haul it away, and the soil gets almost nothing. So here is the method the Romans knew, the method Columella wrote down around the year 60, and the method modern soil scientists have now confirmed with hard measurements. You do not wait. You do not harvest. When the plant is in full bloom, At the peak of its purple or white or pink flowers, that is the moment to act. And you do one more thing that feels completely wrong until you understand it. You do not pull the plant up, you cut it off. Right at the ground, at the soil line, with a pair of scissors, or a knife, or even just by hand. You leave every single root in the ground, undisturbed, with all those nitrogen-packed pink nodules still attached. Then you take the leafy green top you just cut and you lay it right down on the soil, or chop it up and mix it into the top inch of dirt. Gardeners of old had a name for this. They called it green manure. You are giving the soil the richest, greenest part of the plant at the exact moment it holds the most nitrogen, and you are leaving the whole underground factory in place to break down and feed the ground. That is the difference between borrowing the fertilizer and keeping it. Pull it up and cart it off, and you have gained almost nothing. Cut it at flowering and leave the roots, and you have just fed your soil for free with nitrogen pulled straight out of the sky. That single distinction, cut, do not pull, and do it at flowering, not at harvest, is the entire forgotten method in one sentence. And it is the piece that got lost the day we started buying our nitrogen in a bag. There is one more small trick that turns this from good to almost unfair, and it comes straight out of the story we started with. Remember those tiny bacteria, the partner that actually does the work? They live in the soil, but not every patch of dead ground has them. The Icelanders learned that in barren volcanic gravel, sometimes the lupine seed and the bacteria both had to be introduced together because the bacteria simply were not there yet. You can do the very same thing in your own yard, and it costs nothing. When you plant your legumes, take one small handful of soil from a spot where beans, peas, or clover grew well before even a neighbor's healthy garden, and sprinkle it into the planting hole. You are moving the bacteria in the same way that Forrester moved life into Iceland's deserts in 1945. Give the plant its partner, and the factory starts up faster and runs stronger. Think about what this really means. Every year, millions of people pay for bag after bag of nitrogen fertilizer, hauling home the exact thing that a handful of soaked peas from the pantry and a pair of scissors could make for free. The knowledge was never destroyed. It was written down by a Roman 2,000 years ago, kept alive by medieval villages, taught by George Washington Carver, and proven again on the black deserts of Iceland by people so determined to save their soil that they founded the world's first soil agency back in 1907. It survived every one of those centuries. It only nearly died in ours, in the space of 2 short generations, because it became more profitable to sell it to us than to let us grow it. But you have it back now. It is sitting in your kitchen cabinet tonight, and no one can put it in a bag and sell it to you ever again, because you know where it really comes from. It comes out of the air for free, the same way it always has. So here's what I want you to carry away from all of this. Somewhere along the line, we were quietly talked out of the idea that the ground under our feet could take care of itself. We were handed a bill for something the earth was always willing to give us for nothing. And getting that back is not really about saving a few dollars on fertilizer, though you will. It is about knowing deep down that you are not as dependent as they would like you to believe. You are the kind of person who would rather understand how something works than just keep paying for it. You trust the plain evidence of a pink nodule on a root over a promise printed on a plastic bag. That is not old-fashioned. That is the exact common sense that built every garden and fed every family before the factories came, and it is yours again the moment you use it. So let me ask you something, and I really do want you to answer. When you dig up that first little plant and look at its roots, come back here and tell me, did you find those tiny pink beads clinging to the roots? Yes or no? Leave a comment right now and tell me what you found, because I read them and I want to know how many of you actually went and looked. This audience never comments unless I ask, so I am asking you directly. Tell me what you found in your dirt. And if you are the kind of person who wants to recover the things that were quietly taken from us and sold back one bag at a time, then subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are digging this old knowledge back up. Because next time, I am going to show you the forgotten reason our grandparents never watered their gardens the way we do, and how a single trick with the soil surface kept their ground moist for a week in the hottest part of summer without turning on a hose. You will want to hear that one before the next dry spell hits, so stay with me and let us keep bringing this back, one kitchen table at a time. This video showed you the idea, but inside the practical wisdom circle, I take it further, the full lupine and legume soil building method for your own yard, right where this video left off. If something puzzles you, ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. You belong here with practical folks working their own land. Just point your phone at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime, one click.